I want to start today with a question that might feel uncomfortable, but I'm asking it because the answer matters more than most men realize. How many hours did you spend sitting yesterday? Not moving, not exercising, just sitting. At a desk, in a car, on the couch after dinner, in front of a screen. Add it up honestly. For the average man over 50 living a typical modern life, that number is somewhere between 8 and 12 hours on any given day. And if you are one of the millions of men noticing reduced energy, less firmness during intimacy, lower stamina, a general sense that your body is operating at reduced capacity compared to where it was 5 or 10 years ago, that number may be one of the most significant and most overlooked contributors to what you're experiencing. I'm Dr. Fernanda Oliveira, board-certified urologist, and today's conversation is about something that sits at the absolute center of male vitality after 50. Circulation, blood flow, the network of vessels and biological signals that delivers oxygen, hormones, and nutrients to every tissue in your body, including the tissues that matter most for energy, for physical performance, and for intimate health. We're going to talk about why circulation changes after 50, what the single most common daily habit is that quietly makes it worse, and what a simple, consistent, affordable daily routine can do to begin reversing that decline. My dear friend, if you have been noticing these changes, the fatigue that arrives earlier in the day than it used to, the reduced stamina, the shifts in intimate performance that you haven't quite been able to explain, I want you to hear this before anything else. There is absolutely no reason to feel embarrassed. Millions of men just like you are experiencing exactly this after 50, and in 15 years of clinical practice, I have sat across from more of them than I can count. Men who are otherwise healthy. Men who are doing many things right. Men who simply haven't been given the specific piece of information that explains what's happening and what they can realistically do about it. That is what today is for. Now let me tell you about a patient of mine, a man in his early 60s, an accountant, someone whose professional life had always required long hours at a desk. He came to me with a cluster of complaints that on the surface seemed unrelated. Fatigue, reduced sexual performance, a heaviness in his legs by the end of the day, poor sleep, low motivation. He'd had blood work done elsewhere and been told everything looked reasonably normal, which was both reassuring and deeply frustrating because it left him without an explanation for why he felt the way he felt. When we talked in detail about his daily routine, the picture became very clear very quickly. He was sitting for approximately 10 hours a day. He had a standing desk he'd bought 3 years ago and never fully committed to using. He drove to work, sat at his desk, drove home, ate dinner, and spent the evening on the couch. His body was moving for perhaps 30 minutes out of every 16 waking hours. I explained to him what I'm about to explain to you, that prolonged sitting is not simply inactivity. It is a physiological state that actively compresses blood vessels in the lower body, slows venous return to the heart, reduces the production of a critical molecule called nitric oxide, and creates a cumulative pattern of circulatory compromise that accumulates over months and years into symptoms that feel exactly like what he was describing. We made several targeted changes to his daily routine, beginning with something as simple as regular movement breaks and a morning walk. Within 3 weeks, he came back and described himself as feeling like a different person. Not because we had done anything dramatic, because we had removed the thing that was quietly strangling his circulation every single day. That story is not unusual. In fact, some version of it is one of the most common things I see in my practice. And it matters so much that I want to make sure you understand the biology completely. Because once you see clearly what prolonged sitting actually does to your vascular system, the motivation to change it becomes genuinely self-sustaining. Let's talk about blood flow, and specifically about what controls it at the level of the vessel wall. Your blood vessels are not passive tubes. They are living, dynamic structures lined with a layer of cells called the endothelium. And that endothelium is metabolically active. It responds to signals, it produces substances that regulate vessel tone, and it plays a central role in determining how much blood flows through any given vessel at any given moment. The most important substance the endothelium produces for our purposes today is nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a small molecule with an outsized role in vascular health. When the endothelial cells produce it, it diffuses into the smooth muscle surrounding the vessel wall and causes that muscle to relax. The vessel dilates. Blood flows through more easily. Pressure is maintained with less cardiac effort, and the tissues supplied by that vessel receive oxygen and nutrients more efficiently. For men, this process is directly relevant to energy, to physical performance, and specifically to erectile function, because an erection is fundamentally a nitric oxide-dependent event. The signal that initiates blood flow into erectile tissue, the relaxation of the vessels that allows that tissue to fill and firm, the maintenance of the erection, all of it depends on a robust and responsive nitric oxide system. When that system works well, things work well. When it doesn't, the effects ripple outward into every area of male vitality simultaneously. Now, two things reduce nitric oxide production significantly after 50. The first is age itself, which brings a gradual decline in endothelial function and a reduced capacity to produce nitric oxide in response to the stimuli that used to generate it reliably. This is a real and well-documented biological change, and it is part of why the symptoms men experience in this decade feel different from the ones they experienced in their 40s. The second factor is one that is not inevitable, not biological, and entirely within your control. And that factor is inactivity. Prolonged, sustained, daily inactivity. Here is the mechanism, and I want you to really follow this because it's important. Physical movement, even gentle movement, even walking, creates something called shear stress on the endothelial lining of your blood vessels. Shear stress is simply the mechanical force of blood moving across the vessel wall as circulation increases during activity. And shear stress is one of the primary stimuli that triggers endothelial cells to produce nitric oxide. When you move, your vessels experience this mechanical signal and respond by relaxing and opening. When you sit for hours without moving, that signal disappears. The endothelium becomes understimulated. Nitric oxide production declines. Vessels maintain a narrower resting tone than they should. And circulation to the lower body, to the legs, the pelvis, and the tissues we've been discussing, becomes progressively more compromised. Think of it like this. Imagine your blood vessels as a network of flexible pipes running through a building. When water flows through those pipes regularly and with good pressure, the pipes stay clean and elastic and responsive. But when flow is slow or stagnant for long periods, when the system isn't being used the way it was designed to be used, things start to stiffen. Buildup accumulates, pressure drops, and the rooms furthest from the pump are the first ones to notice that something has changed. That is your pelvic circulation, suffering quietly every day while you sit. Now add to this the compression factor. When you sit, particularly in a chair with the hips flexed and the weight of the upper body pressing down, you are physically compressing the blood vessels in the upper thigh and groin area. Major vessels that supply blood to the lower body are running through tissue that is under direct mechanical pressure for hours at a time. The flow through those vessels is reduced not just by the nitric oxide deficit, but by simple physical compression. And when blood flow to the pelvis is chronically reduced in this way, the consequences for erectile function and for intimate performance are direct and measurable. This is why I sometimes say to my patients that prolonged sitting is, for men over 50, one of the most significant unaddressed threats to their sexual health. Not because it's dramatic or sudden, it happens slowly, invisibly, one sedentary hour at a time, but because of how comprehensively it undermines the vascular system that male vitality depends on. The good news, and there is genuine, substantial good news here, is that the endothelium is responsive. It is not permanently damaged by years of inactivity. When you begin providing it with the mechanical stimulation it needs, nitric oxide production begins to recover. Vessel tone improves. Circulation to the lower body increases, and men feel this change in ways that are tangible and often surprisingly rapid. The patient I described earlier noticed meaningful improvements within 3 weeks. I see that timeline regularly. The vascular system, given the right inputs, responds faster than most men expect. And here is where the conversation becomes genuinely practical. because the movement required to stimulate this recovery doesn't need to be intense. It doesn't require a gym membership or a training program or physical fitness that many men over 50 simply don't have or can't sustain. What it requires is consistency and frequency, short, regular interruptions to sitting throughout the day, and a daily walk of meaningful but entirely manageable duration, 20 to 30 minutes most days. 2 to 3 minutes of standing or light movement every hour during a sedentary workday. That is the physical prescription, and it is one that almost any man can begin tomorrow, regardless of his current fitness level. But movement is only one part of this picture. Because the vascular system also responds to nutritional inputs, to the presence or absence of specific nutrients that either support or undermine endothelial function and nitric oxide production. And several of the most important of those nutrients are ones that men over 50 are commonly deficient in without knowing it. Magnesium is the one I return to most consistently because its role in vascular function is so direct and its deficiency so prevalent. Magnesium helps smooth muscle tissue relax, including the smooth muscle in blood vessel walls. When magnesium is adequate, vessels dilate more readily and maintain better resting tone. When it's low, vessels stay in a slightly more constricted state, circulation is less efficient, and the entire system operates under more resistance than it should. In the context of everything we've been discussing today, magnesium deficiency and a sedentary lifestyle are a particularly unfavorable combination, both pushing in the same direction, both reducing the circulation that energy and intimate function depend on. There are also dietary factors that directly support nitric oxide production. Antioxidants that protect the nitric oxide molecule from being degraded before it can act, foods that provide the amino acid precursors the endothelium uses to synthesize it, and morning habits as simple as warm water with lemon that support circulation and gentle metabolic activation at the start of the day when the body is transitioning from overnight rest into daytime function. I'm going to walk you through all of the specific practical steps in just a moment. The mistakes that are silently working against your circulation right now, the simple daily routine that addresses them directly, and the realistic timeline you can expect when you begin making these changes consistently. But I want you to stay with me through what comes next, because one of the 4 mistakes I'm going to describe is something I virtually guarantee you are currently doing, and it is not the sitting. It is something else entirely, something that happens during the hours when you're not sitting, that most men never connect to their circulation at all. That is exactly where we are going next. The mistakes are where the real leverage is. Because the biology we've covered, the nitric oxide system, the endothelial response to movement, the vascular consequences of prolonged sitting, all of that knowledge only translates into results when the daily habits surrounding it are aligned. And these 4 errors are so normalized, so embedded in the routines of most men over 50, that they tend to persist simply because nobody has ever identified them as problems. Let's go through them one by one. The first mistake is the one we've been building toward the entire first half of this conversation, and I want to address it with enough specificity that it becomes genuinely actionable rather than staying as a vague awareness. Prolonged sitting without movement breaks. Not just the fact of a sedentary lifestyle in general, the specific pattern of sitting for 2, 3, 4 uninterrupted hours at a stretch, which is what most men's actual days look like when they examine them honestly. The research on this is quite clear, and what it shows is that the vascular consequences of extended sitting are not simply proportional to total daily sitting time. The interruption pattern matters independently. A man who sits for 8 hours but stands or walks briefly every 45 minutes to an hour maintains significantly better endothelial function than a man who sits for the same 8 hours in 2 or 3 long, unbroken blocks. The shear stress signal, that mechanical stimulus that triggers nitric oxide production, needs to be reintroduced regularly throughout the day, not just once in the morning and once in the evening. The vessel walls respond to frequency, not just total volume of movement. The practical implementation of this is simpler than most men expect. Set a reminder on your phone or your watch to go off every hour during your workday. When it does, stand up, walk to another room, walk to the end of the hallway and back. Go outside for 2 minutes if you can. It doesn't need to be a workout. It needs to be a break in the compression and the stagnation. 2 to 3 minutes of movement every hour, sustained consistently across the day, produces a meaningfully different circulatory profile than the same total movement concentrated into one session. And for men whose work or home routines make this feel difficult, I'll say what I say to my patients. Starting with 1 or 2 breaks per day is infinitely better than none. Build the habit gradually. Let it become automatic. Then increase the frequency as it becomes part of your normal rhythm. The second mistake is nutritional, and it's one that most men don't connect to circulation at all because the link isn't obvious. It's a diet low in the foods that directly support nitric oxide pathways. Leafy green vegetables, spinach, arugula, kale, are rich in dietary nitrates that the body converts into nitric oxide through a specific biological pathway that operates independently of the endothelial production system. Citrus fruits provide vitamin C and antioxidants that protect nitric oxide from oxidative degradation, meaning they help the nitric oxide your body produces actually survive long enough to reach the vessel wall and do its job. Berries provide polyphenols that support endothelial function directly. And beets, perhaps the most nitrate-dense food available, have been studied specifically for their effects on vascular function and physical performance. Most men over 50 are eating very little of these foods on a regular basis, and the absence of them creates a nutritional gap in the nitric oxide system that no amount of walking can fully compensate for. The two approaches, movement and nutrition, work synergistically, each amplifying the benefit of the other. Movement stimulates endothelial nitric oxide production. Dietary nitrates provide an alternative production pathway. Antioxidants protect the molecule once it's produced. Together, they create a vascular environment that is genuinely more capable of the dilation and responsiveness that circulation and intimate function depend on. A simple morning habit that combines several of these benefits is warm water with the juice of half a lemon and a teaspoon of raw honey taken first thing in the morning before anything else. It hydrates the system after overnight fast, provides vitamin C for antioxidant support, gently stimulates circulation and digestive function, and establishes a positive metabolic tone for the rest of the day. It takes 90 seconds to prepare and costs almost nothing. And starting the day with a deliberate health-supporting habit has a psychological dimension as well. It sets an intention that tends to carry forward into the choices that follow. The third mistake is one we've visited across multiple videos on this channel, and I keep returning to it because it keeps showing up as a central factor in case after case. Inadequate magnesium intake. I want to frame it specifically in the context of circulation today because I think that framing makes the connection more concrete and more motivating than the general statement that magnesium is important for health. Your blood vessels are surrounded by smooth muscle. That muscle is what contracts and relaxes to regulate vessel diameter and therefore blood flow. Magnesium is essential for smooth muscle relaxation. When magnesium levels are adequate, vessel walls maintain a more relaxed, resting tone. They are open, responsive, and able to dilate further when circulation demands increase. When magnesium is deficient, smooth muscle maintains a slightly more contracted state. Vessels are narrower at baseline. Resistance to blood flow is higher, and the circulatory efficiency that the tissues of the lower body depend on is reduced. Not dramatically, not in a way that produces obvious acute symptoms, but chronically and cumulatively in exactly the way that produces the subtle but persistent changes men over 50 describe. 200 to 400 milligrams of magnesium glycinate in the evening addresses this directly and efficiently. The glycinate form is well absorbed and well tolerated, and its mild calming effect on the nervous system complements the vascular benefit by supporting the parasympathetic state that encourages both restful sleep and the circulatory patterns associated with it. As always, if you have underlying health conditions or take medications, please discuss this with your doctor before adding any supplement. But for the majority of men over 50, this is one of the most straightforward and high-return nutritional adjustments available. The fourth mistake is sleep, and I want to approach this one differently than I usually do, because I think the circulation angle on sleep is underappreciated even by men who already understand that sleep matters for testosterone. During sleep, specifically during the deep, slow wave stages, the body undergoes what researchers sometimes call vascular housekeeping. Blood pressure drops, the cardiovascular system operates under reduced load, and the endothelial cells that line your blood vessels undergo repair and regeneration processes that cannot happen during waking hours when the system is under constant demand. Men who are chronically sleep deprived or whose sleep is chronically shallow are missing this vascular maintenance window night after night. And over months and years, the cumulative impact on vessel wall health and endothelial function is significant. Poor sleep also elevates cortisol, which causes vasoconstriction, the opposite of what you need for healthy circulation and erectile function. And it reduces testosterone, which has its own relationship with vascular health and vessel responsiveness. So, sleep deprivation doesn't just affect how you feel the next day. It actively degrades the vascular infrastructure that determines how well your body circulates blood to every tissue that matters for energy and intimate performance. 7 to 8 hours at a consistent time each night, with screens off 30 to 60 minutes before bed to allow melatonin production to initiate properly. That is the standard I hold my patients to, because that is what the research consistently supports as the minimum for genuine vascular recovery overnight. Now, let me give you the complete daily routine that addresses all four of these mistakes simultaneously, because I think seeing it as a whole makes clear how manageable it actually is. Your morning begins with warm lemon water before anything else. Then breakfast with intentional inclusion of something from the nitrate and antioxidant category, a handful of spinach and eggs, some berries alongside your meal, a piece of citrus fruit, nothing complicated. Just a deliberate choice to give your nitric oxide system something to work with from the first meal of the day. During your working hours, the movement breaks. Every hour, 2 to 3 minutes of standing and walking. Set the reminder if you need to. Most men do it first until the habit becomes automatic. This is the single highest leverage change you can make for your daytime circulation, and its cumulative effect across a full workday is substantial. In the afternoon, where possible, a 20 to 30-minute walk. Outside, if you can manage it, natural light has its own benefits for circadian rhythm and cortisol regulation. But indoors on a treadmill or even around the house is meaningfully better than nothing. This is the sustained aerobic stimulus that most powerfully drives endothelial nitric oxide production and vessel adaptation over time. It doesn't need to be fast. It doesn't need to be intense. It needs to be consistent and reasonably sustained. Your evening follows the pattern we've discussed in previous videos. Light dinner finished 2 to 3 hours before bed. Magnesium glycinate alongside a warm evening drink, ginger, cinnamon, honey, warm water, taken about 45 minutes before sleep. Screens off, lights dimmed, consistent bedtime. That is the complete daily framework. Morning hydration and nutrition, hourly movement breaks, an afternoon walk, a supportive evening routine, and 7 to 8 hours of protected sleep. None of it requires equipment, expense, or dramatic lifestyle disruption. All of it works on the same underlying system, the vascular network that delivers everything your body needs to function, to perform, and to feel like itself. Let me tell you what to expect, because I want you to have realistic and genuinely encouraging expectations, rather than either false promises or unnecessary pessimism. Within the first 1 to 2 weeks, most men notice changes in energy, not a dramatic transformation, a steadiness. The afternoon heaviness that has become normal begins to lift slightly. Movement feels a little easier. Sleep, with the magnesium and the consistent bedtime, tends to deepen noticeably in this early window. By weeks 3 and 4, the circulatory improvements begin to manifest more tangibly. Men describe better stamina during physical activity, a return of morning vitality that had been absent. One of my patients, a man in his early 60s who had been following this kind of routine for about a month, came back and said something I found genuinely moving. He said he'd forgotten what it felt like to feel physically capable. Not athletic, not young, just capable. reliable in his own body, present and energetic in the way he used to take for granted. That feeling, rebuilt through the most fundamental and accessible of daily habits, is what this approach is designed to produce. Please remember, as I always say, this is educational information and it is not a substitute for proper medical evaluation. If you are experiencing chest discomfort, significant or sudden changes in erectile function, severe fatigue, or any symptoms that concern you, please see a qualified healthcare professional. These habits support the body's natural vascular health and are appropriate for the vast majority of men dealing with common age-related circulatory changes. But individual situations require individual evaluation, and your health is worth a proper clinical conversation when that's what's needed. If you are going to start the walking habit today, even just a 10-minute walk this afternoon as your first step, go to the comments and type the words, "I'm starting today." Say it, name it. The men who commit to it out loud are consistently the ones who follow through, and following through is what produces the results. And if this conversation gave you a clearer picture of what's actually happening in your body and what you can do about it, please subscribe to this channel. Every week, I bring honest, practical, clinically grounded guidance to help men over 50 stay strong, stay vital, and stay fully present in their own lives. Your circulation is not fixed. Your vascular system is responsive and capable of meaningful recovery when you give it the right inputs consistently over time. Start today. Give it a month, and let your body show you what it's still capable of. I'll see you in the next one, my friend.